Daniel Carter had always dreamed of exploring the stars, but he never imagined he would be kidnapped by an alien fleet and taken across the galaxy. One moment, he was scanning an unknown energy signal on a distant planet, and the next, his ship was surrounded by massive, glowing vessels. His controls had shut down. His distress signals went unanswered. And then, darkness. When he woke up, he found himself inside a grand hall unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of dark metal with intricate silver carvings that shimmered under the blue glow of hovering lights. Towering pillars stretched high, their tops lost in the mist of the domed ceiling. It felt more like an ancient palace than a spaceship or military base. Daniel sat in the center of a circular platform, his wrists unchained but his freedom still uncertain. He was not alone. Rows of tall, armored figures surrounded him, standing in complete silence. Their smooth black exoskeleton-like armor gave them an imposing appearance, and their glowing golden eyes watched him without blinking. But it was the figure seated on the throne ahead of him that made his breath catch. A woman, if she could be called that, sat with an air of absolute power. She was taller than any human he had ever seen, at least 8 feet, with smooth, deep violet skin that almost looked metallic under the soft light. A long, flowing cape made of shimmering silver fabric draped over her shoulders, and a sharp, elegant crown rested on her brow. She was beautiful, but not in a way that felt human. She looked like a queen from an empire far beyond Earth's understanding, and she was staring directly at him. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to gather his thoughts. He had no idea where he was or what these aliens wanted. If they meant to harm him, they would have done it already. Instead, they had brought him to this grand hall. Why? The queen finally spoke, her voice deep and smooth, carrying the weight of authority. You are awake, human. Good. Daniel hesitated before responding. Where am I? What do you want from me? She leaned forward slightly, her glowing violet eyes studying him with curiosity. You stand in the throne hall of the Xilari Empire, and what I want is you. A cold chill ran down Daniel's spine. That was not the answer he expected. Me? He frowned. Why? The queen rose from her throne, and the room seemed to grow quieter. Her presence was commanding, as if the very air around her responded to her movement. You will be my king. Daniel blinked, sure he had misheard. Excuse me. The queen's expression remained unreadable. The ancient prophecy speaks of a ruler who will bring strength to the empire. That ruler must be an outsider, a warrior from beyond the stars. You are the first human to step foot in our domain. You are the one chosen. Daniel let out a sharp breath. Okay, hold on. You're telling me that just because I showed up here, I have to be your king. Not just because you arrived, she said, tilting her head slightly. Because you are human. That answer surprised him. What did his species have to do with anything? The Xilari Empire was clearly advanced, with powerful technology beyond human understanding. Why would they need him? Look, Your Majesty, I think there's been a mistake, Daniel said, standing up slowly. I'm just an explorer, a scientist, not a king. I don't know your customs, your people, or your empire. I can't be what you're looking for. The queen stepped closer, and the guards tensed as if ready to react. But she simply studied him, as if trying to see through his very soul. You misunderstand, Daniel Carter, she said, her tone softer but firm. This is not a request. You will be my king, and you will not leave this place. Daniel's heart pounded. She was serious. You're keeping me prisoner? He asked, his voice sharp. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned back toward her throne. You will be treated with honor and given everything you desire, but you cannot leave. The doors of the hall closed behind him with a deep, echoing boom. Daniel clenched his fists. He had come here seeking discovery, but now he had stumbled into something far bigger than himself. A queen had chosen him. A prophecy had bound him. and an entire empire refused to let him go. One thing was certain, he had to find a way out. Daniel Carter stood frozen as the massive doors of the Grand Hall sealed shut behind him. The weight of the Queen's words still echoed in his mind. "You will be my king, and you will not leave this place." His heart pounded. This wasn't an invitation, it was a command. The Queen, tall and regal, turned back toward him. Her violet skin shimmered under the soft glow of the floating lights. Her piercing gaze locked onto his, watching his every reaction. Did she expect him to bow? To agree? That wasn't going to happen. Daniel took a slow breath. "Stay calm. Think." "Look, Your Majesty," he started, forcing his voice to stay steady. "I don't know what this prophecy says, but I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm not a king. I'm just an explorer from Earth." The Queen stepped forward, her long silver cape flowing behind her. "You underestimate your importance, Daniel Carter." Daniel clenched his fists. He had no weapons, no way to fight back. If he wanted to escape, he had to be smart. Maybe he could talk his way out of this. "Why a human?" he asked. "Your empire is advanced. Your people are strong. Why choose an outsider?" The Queen studied him for a moment before responding. "Because humanity is different." Daniel frowned. "Different how?" She gestured toward the towering guards who stood in silent formation. "My people are warriors. We are powerful, but we are bound by tradition, by rules. Humans, however, are unpredictable. You adapt. You survive in ways no other species can. You fight even when all odds are against you." Daniel let out a short breath. So, that was it. They didn't just want a king. They wanted a human king. But that didn't change the fact that he had no intention of staying here. He shook his head. "Even if that's true, I can't accept this. My home is Earth. I need to go back." The Queen's expression didn't change. "You cannot leave, Daniel. You were brought here for a reason. If you refuse to rule, then I will have no choice but to keep you as my guest. Forever." Daniel's jaw tightened. Guest. More like prisoner. He took a step back, eyeing the guards around him. They didn't move, but he had no doubt they would stop him the second he tried anything. He had to change his approach. Daniel sighed, trying to appear less defensive. "Let's say I believe you," he said carefully. "Let's say I agree to stay. What does being your king even mean? What do you expect me to do?" The Queen raised an eyebrow, as if pleased by his question. "You will stand at my side. You will learn our ways. You will lead our warriors into battle when the time comes." Daniel's stomach twisted. Battle? Against who? The Queen's eyes darkened. "The Vortari. Our greatest enemy. They seek to destroy our empire." Daniel had never heard of them, but he had no interest in fighting an alien war. "And if I refuse?" he asked. The Queen's gaze hardened. "Then you will remain here as my honored captive. You will live in luxury, but you will never set foot outside this palace again." Daniel's mind raced. She wasn't going to let him go. He needed a plan, a way to escape. But for now, he had no choice. He had to play along. He forced a small smile. "All right, I'll think about it." The Queen's lips curved slightly, as if she already knew his answer. "Good. You will be given your own chambers. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your lessons begin." The guard stepped forward, signaling for him to follow. Daniel exhaled slowly, then turned and walked with them. As the doors opened, he glanced back at the Queen. She was still watching him. She had chosen him. She believed he belonged to her empire. But Daniel had other plans. No matter what it took, he was going to find a way out. Daniel sat on the edge of the luxurious bed in his new chambers, staring at the high ceiling. The room was massive, decorated with shining metal walls and floating lanterns that bathed everything in a soft blue glow. The bed itself was large enough for 3 people, covered in smooth silk-like fabric. It was beautiful, but it was still a prison. The doors were guarded. The windows, if they could even be called that, were reinforced with some kind of shimmering energy field. Escape wouldn't be easy. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. He needed a plan. A soft chime echoed through the room. A moment later, the doors slid open and a figure stepped inside. It was Zyra, the Queen's closest advisor. She was tall, with dark violet skin and sharp golden eyes. Unlike the Queen, who carried herself like an empress, Zyra had the stance of a warrior. Her armor gleamed under the lantern light. She studied Daniel for a moment before speaking. "You are restless." Daniel crossed his arms. "That's a nice way of saying I don't want to be here." Zyra stepped closer. "The Queen has chosen you for a great purpose. You should feel honored." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Oh, I'm honored, all right. Trapped in a golden cage, forced into a role I never asked for. It's a dream come true." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand our ways." Daniel sighed. "Then explain them to me. Why does the Queen want a human as her king?" Zyra hesitated, then gestured for him to follow. "Walk with me." Daniel glanced at the guards at the door. Were they really going to let him out? Surprisingly, they stepped aside. Daniel followed Zyra through the grand hallways. The palace was a mix of ancient and futuristic design. Massive stone pillars, but with glowing lines of energy running through them. Strange plants floated in the air, their petals shimmering like fireflies. Finally, Zyra stopped in front of a large mural carved into the wall. It depicted a battle, towering alien warriors, weapons clashing, and in the center, a human figure standing tall. Daniel frowned. "Is that a human?" Zyra nodded. "Your kind has been here before." Daniel's stomach tightened. What happened to them? Zyra's expression didn't change. "They fought for the Queen. Some became heroes. Others were lost in battle." Daniel clenched his jaw. So he wasn't the first. And judging by the way Zyra spoke, he wouldn't be the last. He turned to her. "What if I refuse?" Zyra studied him carefully. "Then the Queen will keep you here. She will not harm you, but you will never leave." Daniel felt his muscles tense. So that was it. He had no real choice. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a way out before things got worse. Zyra turned to leave. "Rest tonight, Daniel Carter. Tomorrow, you begin your training." Daniel watched her disappear down the hallway, then looked back at the mural. The human figure stood proud in the carving. But how many others had stood there before him? And how many had never made it back home? Daniel woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps outside his chamber. He sat up quickly, his mind still foggy from sleep. Had he dreamed all of this? The alien queen, the palace, the prophecy? No, it was real, and he was still trapped. The doors slid open, and Zyra stepped inside, her golden eyes sharp as ever. "It's time." Daniel rubbed his face. "Time for what?" "Your training." Daniel frowned. "I never agreed to that." Zyra smirked. "Then fail. But at least try." She turned and motioned for him to follow. Daniel hesitated, then sighed and got up. If he wanted to escape, he needed to understand this place better. Maybe training would give him a chance. They walked through the towering halls until they reached a massive open arena. The sky above was a deep violet, two suns casting a golden glow over the towering walls. Hundreds of alien warriors stood in formation, their armor gleaming in the light. Daniel swallowed hard. This wasn't just training. It was a test. The Queen sat on an elevated throne, her piercing gaze locked onto him. Beside her, a massive alien warrior stepped forward. He was over 7 feet tall, his dark armor making him look even more intimidating. Zyra turned to Daniel. "This is Torvak. He is the Queen's best warrior." Daniel forced a smile. "Great. So what? We shake hands and call it a day." Torvak let out a low growl. "We fight." Daniel's stomach dropped. He wasn't a soldier. He was an explorer. He turned to Zyra. "You're kidding." Daniel didn't stop. He jumped onto Torvak's back, locking an arm around his neck. Torvak roared, thrashing wildly. Daniel held on for dear life, knowing that if he let go, he wouldn't get another chance. The warrior slammed his back into the ground, crushing Daniel beneath him. Pain exploded through Daniel's ribs. Silence fell over the chamber. Even Zyra's usual cold expression flickered with surprise. Daniel let out a short laugh. "I think you've got the wrong guy." The queen's gaze remained steady. "You defeated my strongest warrior. You showed resilience, intelligence, and spirit. Our traditions demand that the strongest shall rule beside me." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't come here to rule your empire. I didn't even come here by choice." The queen's expression didn't change. "And yet, fate has chosen you." Daniel clenched his fists. "I don't believe in fate." The queen stood, her presence towering over the room. "Then believe in survival." She gestured toward the guards. "If you refuse, you will be seen as a threat, and threats must be eliminated." The meaning was clear. Either he accepted, or he wouldn't live to leave this palace. Daniel felt his heart pound. Trapped. Again. He took a slow breath. Think. He needed time. A way out. Finally, he met the queen's gaze. "If I agree, what happens next?" A small smile touched her lips. "Then you prove yourself worthy in the final test." Daniel didn't like the sound of that, but he had no choice. Daniel stood in the middle of the grand hall, his heart pounding. The queen's words echoed in his mind. "If you refuse, you will be seen as a threat, and threats must be eliminated." He had no way out. If he rejected her offer, he would not leave this place alive. The queen stepped forward, her golden eyes locked onto him. "Your final test begins now." Daniel tensed. Another fight. Another impossible challenge. But then the massive doors at the end of the hall opened, and instead of a warrior stepping inside, it was a group of prisoners. Humans. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Survivors. They looked weak, covered in dirt and bruises. Their eyes held fear, but the moment they saw him, hope flickered in their expressions. The queen turned to Daniel. "These humans were captured during past battles. They are nothing but a burden to my empire." She raised a hand. "Kill them." The word sent a cold shock through his body. "What?" The queen's expression remained firm. "You wish to prove yourself. Then show your loyalty to me. Execute them." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. This was it. The real test. He looked at the prisoners. Innocent people. His people. Slowly, he turned back to the queen. "No." Gasps filled the chamber. Whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire. The queen's gaze sharpened. "You refuse." Daniel took a deep breath. "I came here against my will. I survived against your warrior. I stood against your traditions. But I will not become your puppet." He stepped forward, standing tall. "If you want me dead, then do it yourself." The hall fell into complete silence. No one had ever dared to speak to the queen like this. Then, to Daniel's shock, the queen smiled. "Good." Daniel blinked. "What?" The queen's expression softened, and she stepped closer. "This was the final test, human. I did not need a king who would blindly follow my orders. I needed one who would stand for what he believes in." She turned to the court. "This human has passed. He will rule beside me." The entire chamber erupted into a mix of cheers and murmurs. Some were in disbelief, others in admiration. Even Zyra, who had been standing in the shadows, let out an impressed huff. Daniel exhaled, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. The queen leaned in slightly. "You are free to leave, if that is what you truly want. But know this, beside me, you could change the fate of this empire." Daniel looked at the prisoners, at Zyra, at the grand empire that had nearly taken everything from him. He had a choice, and for the first time, it was truly his to make. The end.